Welcome to FedScoopTV. I'm Camille Tootie, FedScoop's editorial director, and I'm sitting here with Wolf Tombe. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about open source. What trends do you see in open source?
Well, I think there are a couple. First is that the government's embracing open source, specifically because it allows us to do things a little bit quicker and faster. And frankly, it helps us break the history of vendor lock-in that we've had, which has often increased our costs. So it is a definite cost savings move as well. The other big trend that's happened though to help support this is that the Federal Code of Acquisition Regulations was updated this year to actually formally put open source on par with commercially off-the-shelf available software. So that's huge from a procurement perspective, is that it makes it much easier for me to get to open source and justify the requirement for open source.
What are some of the security challenges in incorporating open source for federal agencies?
I think that's an interesting question because I actually think there are security benefits to incorporating open source. So the fact that the source is actually open, I can see the code, I can run security scans, I can check for backdoors or exploits. I can't do that in my proprietary capabilities. I have to rely on the vendor to do that for me. So I think that's a huge win for the government and makes things much more easy for us to manage. Also, if I want to integrate something into open source, such as PIV card enablement for login, I can create a module to do that myself. I don't have to wait for a vendor to do that for me. And once I've done that, I can share that module across the federal government and any other agency can use it at virtually no cost. So there's huge benefits. I think the other thing to look at is that in terms of responding to things like zero-day threats, last year the open source community was much faster at providing patches, often releasing a patch in 2 to 3 days, where our proprietary vendors would take weeks to sometimes months to issue the same type of patch. So I think there are huge benefits.
Is there a different way that the government uses open source as opposed to industry?
I don't think it's different. I think we were a little bit slower to adopt open source, so we're newer at it. But we're also rapidly moving towards it. So I think we'll be on par with industry much sooner. And the reason for that is driven by primarily two very disruptive technology events that are occurring right now, one of which is mobility, and the other of which is cloud adoption, both of which open source plays a critical role in and helps us give us a jump start towards adoption of those technologies.
If you look at the future, how do you see the use of open source evolve?
Great question. Well, I think what we saw from the beginning was that open source started kind of at the bottom of the technology portfolio stack. So Linux as an OS for servers, then Apache as a web server counterpart to some of the proprietary capabilities. And then we saw things like JBoss and Tomcat as application servers. I think the future is actually taking open source across the entire IT portfolio and making it a viable alternative. And I think that is going to happen because of cost factors and because the millennials, as the next generation workforce, are very open to open source. They grew up on it, they're experienced with it, and they're going to push that trend very quickly.
Wolf, thank you so much for chatting with FedScoopTV. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, anytime.